My name is Robert Wiley. I've been teaching self-defense for over 30 years. Every aspect from hand-to-hand to edge, firearms. And the last 15 or 20 years, I've focused a lot on predators, on understanding predators, how they think, and how they operate. So I started seeing that there was a correlation between humans and animals, because ultimately humans are animals. And the way they operate and the way they think, there's more than one type of predator. All too often we think of when you react to a aggressive dog or an aggressive human, that there's one basic technique and that will fit all criteria. It's not so. I found that there are three main types of predators, and each of those you identify differently by their behavioral traits and their actions, and you can also identify them through their environment as well, and you react to those different, or you act accordingly to those three different types, because it's all in how we communicate to be able to overcome their will or their drive to hurt or maim you. Now, as a foundation, we have to understand that all animals on this earth, including humans, their brain is hardwired for self-preservation. So your brain is hardwired for self-preservation. All of your senses are tied into being able to understand possible threats around you, and when you start sensing threats, and you'll notice, all of you are familiar with animals, that dogs, when somebody is scared of a dog, that dog, no matter how mellow or how kind-hearted a dog it is, it will start getting on edge, because it will sense that there's something wrong. That happens with you as well. You can be able to tap into that hardwire, not only to identify threats, but being able to deal with those threats as well. Now, my definition of predator is a very broad definition. Typically, most people think of a predator as, somebody who goes out and abuses children, or a wolf, a grizzly bear. My definition is very broad, because it is anything that has the will and or capability to hurt or kill you. Now, if you take a frog for an example, a frog, most humans don't think of frogs as predators, do you? But to the fly, it can be a formidable predator. Now, did you realize that one of the most dangerous and most poisonous animals on this earth is a frog? The golden dart frog actually has enough poison to kill 10 men. So unless you're in the rainforest and you're out petting frogs, then you don't have to worry about that typically. But the reason why I bring that up is because it is all in context and in the scenario or in the situation that you're in, as far as what can or can't be a predator, or can and can't hurt you. The number one thing that we constantly have to remind people is that denial will kill you faster than any attacker. Because all too often when we look at attacks, those violent attacks are a surprise attack, because predators, all three types of predators, they don't worry about rules, they don't worry about laws. It's great for you, but not for me. They also don't worry about your traditional, you can't do that, because you can't butt in line, you can't do this. It's like, yeah, whatever suits me. They want something for nothing, and they want it for free. The only worries that they have for the first two types of predators is they don't want to be hurt, caged, or killed. They don't want to be injured, because that makes them prey to other predators. They don't want to be caged, because it keeps them away from being able to do what they want to do. And killed is the ultimate, kibosh on doing what you want to do. Now these three main types of predators are, the first one is a scavenger or low-level predator. The next one is an alpha apex or high-level predator. And the third is the most dangerous, which is the sick or disassociated predator. Now, when you're dealing with grooming, and I'm gonna cater this a little more to you guys because it can be a lot more applicable in when you're dealing with your animals that you're taking care of, your clients, both your animal clients and your human clients. The scavenger level predator is typically a lot more unsure and a lot more will exhibit the signs or tells that show stress, or when they show that they're uncertain, or they're about to do an action that may cause them harm, because there's always an inherent risk when you attack. A lot of your scavenger level predators are like your ankle biter dogs, the ones that, now if you've ever noticed, when they want to come in and attack, they'll come in from the side or back. They'll never come in and attack straight on because they're uncertain or they're not comfortable with their skills. Now, different environmental changes can cause these predators to move up and down in these three classifications, which I'll cover in a minute. Now, when you're dealing with scavenger level predators, a lot of the times that you're watching, you're gonna watch for body language, and I love the eyes. The eyes can tell you a lot of things, but not just solely the eyes. You have to have them in proper context. When you're dealing with the eyes, ultimately when you're scanning a room and when you're looking around, you're gonna come in contact with those that will lock eyes with you. Now, a scavenger level predator, all predators use camouflage to blend in. They want to not be seen until it's time for them to actually attack. It helps them with their surprise attacks and helps them be able to attack a victim without the victim being prepared for it. But with a scavenger level predator, when you're looking around or you meet eyes, they'll typically freeze. They'll misdirect their eyes so they won't lock eyes with you. They'll freeze, they'll look back, they'll either try to make themselves look smaller or they'll back up and try to blend in. If you'll ever notice with dogs that are uncertain, and it also works with cats and any other animals, that when they feel threatened, the ears pin back down, they hunker down, and typically will start exhibiting behaviors of uncertain, of stress. Now, with animals, a lot of those indicators are with the eye, with looking away and diverting. Also, they'll do grooming habits, which humans do it as well. If you'll ever notice when humans get nervous, they start rubbing their hands, rubbing their arms, face, rubbing their nose. All of these are calming actions that are trying to calm, the brain is trying to get the body calmed down and the heart rate down. Other exhibits for animals is licking the lips, which when humans as well, when their mouth gets dry, they start, when they're talking, they have a little bit more of a lisp or a little whistle sometimes, and you can tell when their mouth starts getting dry, and they'll start trying to moisten their mouths, they'll lick their lips. Animals are the same way. Yawning is another exhibit of stress. So when you start seeing a scavenger level predator and their ears are pinned down, and you're working on them, then, a lot of the other ones are wider eyes. When the eyes start getting bigger, they start looking farther or looking around a lot more. Those are tells that are a possible sign of an attack. Also, with animals, the great thing about it is they've got posable ears and tails that will tell you wonderful things. But you can't always read it by just the tail. You have to have a combination of that body language. Do you have a question, or are you just stretching?
No, I'm stretching.
Okay. Now, with the combination of the ears, typically when you're looking at extremes, those are your more indicators of a more possible attack. When you're dealing with an animal that's the ears are hyper-focused on you, and their eyes are hyper-focused, the tail is really still, or it flicks a little bit, that is a sign of hunting and predatory behavior as far as prey predatory. When you're dealing with those, the tail is tucked way up underneath or down lower, and the ears are pinned back, that is a sign of a threat by a scavenger level that is more concerned about their self-preservation. They're trying to defend themselves, and typically is the most of the attacks when you're dealing with animals that are a scavenger level. Now your alpha apex level predator, yeah.
So to relate that to a person, who would be a scavenger?
Scavenger level predators that are people,
Yeah.
are those that are a little more timid as far as trying to sneak in, and they're, well, an perfect example is a couple of years ago there was a gal that was exercising on the Greenbelt just across from town here at the Freeman Park, and she had her earphones in, she was booking along, and she was exercising, and she come across a guy that was just sitting there on the bench. She said hi to him, he said hi back, and she kept on going. Well, after she had passed him, he got up and started following her and snuck up behind her and grabbed her, and tried to grab her, pull her into the bushes. She started screaming, and he was like, quiet, be quiet. And she kept on screaming, kept on fighting, and he finally let go and fled. Luckily, there was a couple guys there that followed him, and he was later arrested. He was a convicted sexual offender. So he was trying to rape her and try to have his way, but he was not certain enough with his skills, so he was trying to make sure that he would only attack from the peripheral or from the back. Those type of predators are very, they're easily showing signs of nervousness. They'll show heavy breathing, or a flushed face or a pale face. Any of those extremes. Another thing to watch is when they're breaking social rules, that they're not doing things quite right or that don't fit.
What you call like a house robber scavenger? Like somebody who breaks into your house and no one's home and steals everything? Would that be a scavenger?
Typically, yeah, there's two different, there's robbery and there's burglary. So robbery is when people are present. So robbery is the home invasion type, and they're typically the alpha apex type level. The burglary are those that are trying to make sure that nobody's home and they're going to slip in and steal. Those are typically your lower level scavenger level predators. The alpha apex predator, the difference between them is they're a lot more sure. They're a lot more skilled in their abilities of murder and mayhem. They know what they're doing. A lot of your human traffickers and your serial killers are alpha apex level predators. Now, when you're dealing with them, they don't show the signs of stress as easily. They're a lot more confident. They're a lot more calm. And if you'll notice, when you're dealing with in the animal world, when you deal with like a mountain lion that is a little more skittish, when you're dealing with a coyote that is, more in and out, and then you look at a lion or a grizzly bear. They're a lot more calm, they know what they're doing, they know what they can do, and they don't worry about it, and they actually revel in being able to have challenge. With the alpha apex level predator, when you're dealing with them and you lock eyes, they're not gonna freeze, they're not gonna go down, they're gonna start getting bigger, and they're, you want a piece of me? Huh? Well, animals are the same way. When an alpha apex level predator is in an animal,
Right.
they're typically, in their attacks, they're going to be a prey-hunt relationship. So when they're dealing with, when you're showing the signs of an alpha apex level predator, their tails are typically either straight out or higher, and they move very slow and sure. They're typically in a power position, so instead of huddled, they're a little bit more stable. They're with a human, typically the legs are a little farther apart, more to the shoulder. One foot is typically before the other one, and the hands are up above the waist. This is a power position to be able to move in and move in quickly. When you're dealing with animals, if they're hyper-focused, so when they're watching certain parts of your body, which is called targeting glances, so if they're focused on your neck, or if you're working on an animal and he's looking at you and his tail's not moving, or it's flicking a little bit, and he's focused on your neck or your face, you better get some distance. Distance is your friend whenever you're dealing with any of these predators, because distance gives you more time to react and gives you a better chance to be able to put a shield or a distance or a space between you and the predator. Yeah.
I had a situation, I just kind of want to know your opinion of like how I got out of it. We had a German Shepherd in our salon. Another groomer was working on her and she was asking for help with her nails. And she had been okay in the bath, you know, everything. She was just getting a little fidgety with her nails. So to save my back a lot of the time, I'll just get down on my knees and I'm under and I'm clipping my nails. So I put myself below her. And I just went to touch her foot. I wasn't grabbing, I was just touching it to see how she would react. And everything you just described is what she did. She was down, her eyes were actually on my throat, and she was stiff, and even my fellow groomer was like, you need to back up. So what I did was like, I looked at her, but instead of shooting straight up, I like kept my eye contact with her, and I slowly backed myself away until I was a safe distance, and then I stood up, and then I continued to stare at her until I could feel that she had started to relax, because I just felt like as soon as I turned, she was gonna lunge. In that situation, is there something I could have done better? Is there like something what could I have done to maybe avoid that, you know, that much intensity? Because it was honestly one of the scariest moments I've ever had as a groomer.
It sounds like you did perfectly, because you never want to move rapidly. You don't want to, because rapid movements when you're dealing with a scavenger level predator, they're going to take it as a risk, and so they're going to have to hurry and strike. And with a predator that's an alpha apex, yeah, they're going to be, if you move quickly, it actually turns on their prey mode. When you're dealing with animals if you're dealing with small children or pets, and you have a predator that comes in on you, you never want to pick that child up or that animal up. Never. And it's a natural inherent thing people want to do, is get that child up and away. Well, unfortunately, when you bring that child up, it opens the legs and your vitals open to that attack. And that animal is going to go for that prey that's moving rapidly. One way to deal with that is if you have an animal or a child with you, slowly, you don't want to push the animal behind you either, and you don't want to move rapidly in front. So you want a combination move of sliding whatever you're protecting as you step over. And that way you create a barrier to protect whether that child or that small animal that you're trying to protect as well.
If it's not a small child or animal, they're coming at you, do you just make yourself bigger? Like, because I've had a dog charge me, the only reason they didn't get me is because I hopped a fence. So, they couldn't hop the fence.
Now, if you're running or if you have to realize that you can't just run.
Right.
Because you'll run and you'll die tired.
Right.
Basically, you've got to have a plan. So if you can have a barrier, whether it's get inside of a car and close the door, move a shield or a chair in front of you, as you increase your critical thinking, then you can be able to work through, and we'll cover some things as far as plans go and some exercises a little bit later as well. But every situation is a little different. And you've got to learn how to modify immediately. Just as you lock eyes and you be able to see whether that animal starts reacting or that person starts to react different ways, then you can modify depending on if they start getting more aggressive or if they start backing off. There are some alpha apex predators that, your violent felons, that they pride themselves upon a challenge. So if you start getting bigger and you start getting more aggressive, and you don't ever want to get more aggressive on a alpha apex level predator until it's time to strike. Then you learn targets and strikes and be able, because unfortunately, you're not always going to be able to avoid the situation. Preferably, every opportunity, and unfortunately we're human and we're gonna miss things. We're gonna, even the most skilled situational awareness person can still miss signs. And I mean, we're human. So you have to be able to practice and deal with effective targets and strikes to stop that threat immediately as well. And that's a different class to go over, but you do have to modify between those two. You have.
So, there have been a couple times, an old neighborhood I used to live in, was walking my dog, and the neighborhood wasn't the best, and people just like let their dogs out. There was one time there was a German Shepherd that came up to us. It didn't seem threatening, but I didn't know this dog and I didn't trust it. But it did come at us. Everything was fine, and I kind of did that sidestep thing. Is there anything else you recommend when you're walking your dog and there's just a loose dog? Because she's also really stupid. So she's very interested. She doesn't understand personal space with other dogs too. So
Most, it's unique. It's different when you've got an animal on a leash. They are under tether or control of you. They trust you. So they are taking your lead, and it kind of dumbs them down. It inhibits their ability to be able to defend themselves. So it's ultimately up to you to be able to protect them.
yeah, and that's what I
it's
like
the same
what
way
you
as
said.
kids. It's up to you to be that barrier and to protect them.
But like getting away too, because I didn't know like if we were able to get away from this dog, because it looks sketchy. Because like my fear is like walking away from this dog and this dog just coming at us. But like we're just on an open street, a few blocks from our house, and we just can't run inside. So
Now, when you're dealing with an animal, anytime even if you break eye contact, you'll still want to let that animal know that you are paying attention to them.
that's what I
So
did.
you can subvert when a dog or an animal is really aggressive, even a human is really aggressive, you can subvert a little bit and show a little bit different tilt of the head and be able to, and then move your way back off.
That's essentially what I did.
Because distance is your friend.
Yeah.
It'll always be your friend. And typically when you're moving away, the best and preferred way is at a side. So if you can move sideways, because you don't want to back up, because the last thing you want to do is trip on something and fall on the ground, and then they'll be on you. So you want to be able to move from the side, and you want to maintain that barrier of whatever you're protecting to be able to move around. And you'll want to practice with your pets to be able to move side to side. Another barrier is your foot.
Yeah.
If you can maintain, which a lot of people don't have the balance, but if you can balance well, you can do that. And another effective tool against both alpha and apex and scavenger is sound. When we communicate, when you're dealing with a predator that is trying to manipulate for abuse or fraud, you communicate with them. You say, I see you. How many of you have ever been walking on a trail and had somebody, a stranger coming towards you, and whether it's an animal or a human, and you have that desire to acknowledge that person or that animal coming, whether it's a hi or a nod of the head, that is your brain, because it's wired for self-preservation. It is enacting the communication of acknowledging. Because once you acknowledge a threat, that predator goes, hey, it sees me, my camouflage is gone. It acknowledges me, it knows that I'm less likely to be able to do a surprise attack. Now, to give you the full picture, the third one, the sick or disassociated predator, is the most dangerous because it removes the will out of it. Sick or disassociated predators don't worry about being hurt, killed, or caged, because they know they're either their brains or the chemicals in their system have modified that they don't worry about themselves, or they are more concerned about protecting something else that they don't care anymore. They, you know, if they're sick, unless they kill and eat, they're gonna die anyway, and their brain is disconnected from reason. That's what makes them so dangerous. Some of those that include in that are mama bears. When you're dealing with a parent protecting its young, whether it's a cub or a kitten or whatever, you are opening up a can of worms because they don't care. They're going, whether they die or not, they're gonna kill you. They're gonna die trying to end you before you end their, or even hurt their young. And all they have to do is have the perception that you're gonna hurt them. You don't even have to truly be trying to hurt them, and they're gonna light into you. Other perfect examples is narcotics and mental illness. Animals have mental illness as well. All mental illness is imbalance of chemicals in the brain. Either the body produces different chemicals that causes disassociation or causes it to change the perception of that animal, whether it's a human or dog or cat or whatever. Other signs for a sick or disassociated predator, the eyes. I love the eyes because the eyes are typically glazed over, and if you've ever noticed, when they look at you, they're looking through you instead of at you. That is called a 100-yard stare or 1,000-yard stare. Also, examples is accumulation around the eyes, weeping, those type of things are also indicative of a sick or disassociated predator. Yeah.
So, I have a German Shepherd who was a rescue, and when I first rescued her, she had PTSD, and her flashbacks were really scary because she would do that 100-yard stare. She'd bark at things that weren't there, and she would move her head like she was watching something happening, and you knew that she was reliving something. In that situation, if you snuck up on her or you startled her, it didn't matter who you were, she was gonna go after you. We've worked through it, it's not a problem anymore, but it's always been I at the time was not good with animal behavior, and it's just one thing I've always wondered what to do in that situation, because I was able to snap her out of it, strangers weren't, but it's always something I've wondered, like, how can I protect myself or other people with a dog that's fighting against something that's not there, you know?
Space is your friend. Now, when you're dealing with sick or disassociated, it's also health issues as well, and other environmental issues. Some breeds have hair over their eyes, so it levels and limits their ability to see. When you have limited ability for your senses, you get on edge more. You're more likely to be nippy. I've got a dog that he's losing his eyesight, and so even knowing me and hearing my voice, sometimes if he doesn't see me clearly and things are off, he thinks I'm a threat until I can truly help him communicate to him. Other signs are when an animal or a human's in pain. Pain clouds the mind, so it makes it so that they'll lash out quicker. Distance is always your friend. When you're dealing with your predators, many times you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to decapacitate them, because they're your pets or your clients. And so you can't go for the eyes, you can't do death strikes, you can't do those things. But there are certain moves and certain things that you can cause pain enough or cause them to strike them or get them off balance enough that they'll back off. When you're dealing with animal fights, anything that has a snout, if you have like a smaller baton or a stronger piece of wood and strike on the bridge of the nose, it will cause that to back off. If you have multiple people, if you grab a hold of the tail and a back leg and make them unbalanced, you'll always want to go for the aggressor, the most aggressive one first, if you can't do both at the same time. Now, when you grab and hold those back legs, you want to be prepared for them to come around and attack you. And typically, it's one of the best ways for that is to be able to go for the collar or for the scruff of the neck. But you want to be aware of that when you've got two dogs biting, they're going for the neck. So you'll want to have a slight hesitation between grabbing the leg and grabbing the scruff.
So I've got a story that I wasn't sure, like, what to do with this situation. It's a bit gruesome, and it was a few years ago, and I'm a tad scarred, so I apologize. But I was walking down the street with a friend, and two big dogs were in a yard with a little dog, and they attacked the little dog, and they were killing it right in front of me. And the owner opened the door and didn't do anything, and I was like, your dog's still alive. And she just shut the door, and then I watched them kill this dog, and like I was like, I can't hop on the fence, like I just didn't know because I didn't want to get hurt either, but I'm like still really scarred from that. And so is there something like with that scenario that I could have done to have saved the little dog?
Unfortunately, ultimately, your safety is paramount. When you're dealing with, one thing that we are drilled in our heads as first responders is that you never want to add victims to the scenario. So always, when you're dealing with an unfamiliar scenario, is you always want to evaluate it for your own safety first. And you want to be, it's better to hesitate in going in and save your life than it is to hop into a situation. It's the same thing with domestic violence. When you're dealing with somebody that's beating on their spouse or their pet, or when it seems like the pet is, or the animal is the victim on it, you've got to always watch. And unfortunately, you can't save every victim, especially when you're dealing with pets and animals. You've got to, it's smart to not jump into the middle of it, or you're more likely to become a victim. Even with firearms and you being able to shoot and stop that predator, then you've got legal ramifications. You've got all these other things that unfortunately you can't. And it's the same way when you're fighting off a predator. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get bit. You're going to get cut if somebody's pulling a knife on you. And you can survive that. You want to mitigate it, and so that you're protecting the vitals if you are in a fight. And that's why it's so important to go for very effective targets on your opponent, and also protect your vitals, which your body will naturally respond. When you're introduced to a sudden attack of violence, your body will automatically do what is called the flinch. We call it the body's airbag. And you'll notice if you'll ever look at cases with people in car accidents, if they're not impaired by narcotics, often they'll have broken fingers and arms because they see it coming and protect themselves. Many times when an attacker comes with knives or with a sharp object or with teeth, the defensive wounds are in the hands and arms, because without even thinking, your hands will go up to this position, and your head will duck down, and your core will try to shrink as much as possible, and your hands will move up to here, which we train and teach how to move from that position to targets and strikes to be more effective and quickly be able to deal with that threat. And it works with both animals and humans because those targets are universal. They're soft, easy targets that you can't protect very easily, like the eyes and the throat. Any other? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you're dealing with being able to deal with those scenarios, every scenario is not going to be the same. And ultimately, one thing that you need to focus on after you deal with these different situations is your own mental health as well. That you're going to beat yourself up, you're going to relive it over and over again. What did I do better? What did I do better? As long as you survive and you get away, it's a win. And it's okay to run. It's okay to get away. Now, when I say that, it's not okay to turn and run away from a predator that's gonna chase you and attack you. So it's in context. You have to understand that there's a fine line between, you have to learn the body language, and every situation is gonna be unique. Now, one way to combat that is a scenario or a technique that we like to teach, that's what would I do? Now, when you take different situations, everything from your situation and yours that you brought up, as you take those and go in depth and detail of what I would do in that situation, and go in detail as far as what's going on, what the animal's doing, what the human's doing, where you're at, what you have on you, what you typically carry, what you should probably start carrying just to help you with those tools. And as you go through those in-depth situations and then communicate with those of your friends and family around you, then you can be able to articulate exactly step by step of what you would do, and you always want to do into a positive outcome. Whether it's as simple as get to the exit and get out, or to moving behind the table and being able to use something as an impact tool to defend yourself. Now, you can go to the extremes of looking at news articles. It doesn't take long. In my book that I'm finishing up, it took me a matter of 15 minutes to pull up about 8 different cases that were perfect examples of different situations that people had to defend themselves. And it was local news. So as you're looking through different news articles, as you're looking through different stories that you hear from people, and you can go as extreme as aliens and zombies even. And you may think I'm a little off my rocker on that, I'm mentally ill, but no, did you realize that every government agency has a contingency plan for zombies?
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
I always thought like maybe they do, but I didn't know it was like for real.
It is an actual scenario, and actually they have them for aliens too.
Love it.
But zombies are a perfect example because the Walking Dead movie, the original Walking Dead movie, the reason it started was because they found out that the DOD had a plan for zombies. Now, every one of us in the last 2 years have seen a case of zombies. Do you believe me? I see some different looks, like, I don't know. Think about what has happened in the bigger cities with groups of people as they've protested and as they've gone through and burned down buildings. Riots are an example of zombies. Let me explain. When you're dealing with a riot, you've got a core initial group, patient zero, that are driving the aggressive behaviors. The zombies or the riots are a sick or disassociated pack. When you deal with animals that pack up, and if you do a scavenger level predator and he gets 4 or 5 of his buddies, he becomes an alpha apex level predator. You take either one of those and you introduce drugs and alcohol, they go to a sick or disassociated predator. It's the same way with groups. When they disassociate, what happens is everyday normal people get pulled into these actions, and a riot will absorb all that is around it, or it will destroy what it comes in contact with. So it will either assimilate or destroy what it comes in contact with. And they found that people will go after the case. They're like, I was just walking along, going shopping down the block, and all of a sudden this group came in, and next thing I know, I'm kicking this guy while he's down on the ground, or I'm pushing a car over on its top. And they're like, whoa, I can't believe that it's because their brain has disassociated and they've been morphed into that group. So those situations, now, for dealing with a riot, the best way to deal with it is to blend in, start acting and looking like those around you, and slowly work your way out. Don't run, slowly work your way out of the nexus or the center of that. So you'll want to work out to the side, just like you're swimming out of a rip current. You'll want to work out to the side and get away from that group. But you want to blend in so that they think that they've assimilated you and so they don't destroy you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're dealing with the sick or dissociated predators, unfortunately, the only way to stop them is by severing the ability for them to be able to act or getting distance and getting a shield between you. And, you know, with humans, we don't want to have to put down a human, but ultimately your safety is paramount. And when you're dealing with those that are sick or dissociated, a lot of those symbols or those signs are the hair. If you watch for the hair is matted or disheveled, missing patches, and this is the same with animals and humans. They're acting erratically. If you've ever noticed in the big city when you've got somebody that's high and they're, or ticks, or scratches, that is a sign, and you'll want to be able to move away and get distance. Irregular gait or irregular walks are another sign. Talking to themselves or whenever they're breaking the social rules, those are indicators that you're going to want to watch for. When you're dealing with a sick or dissociated animal, and if they've gotten in pain, they've gotten sick, and unfortunately there are parents or owners that don't recognize that with their own animals. You'd be surprised how often when we're teaching classes that people don't realize that. You know, that's why I'm in business. That's why I have my business and I do this full time, is because there are a lot of people that don't realize the common sense, and we've been deprogrammed to step away from defending ourselves and to also identifying those threats. How often are you telling yourself, or you're being told you're just being crazy, or you're being over dramatic when something is wrong in your body, or your gut is telling you there's something wrong? The vast majority of victims of violent crime recognized that there was something wrong before it happened, and they didn't listen to it. So ultimately, we have to break that programming of society. It's okay to break the rules. When your safety's involved, it's okay to break your rules. If you need to get out, break a window. It's okay. If you need to bite, strike, do anything to get away, sometimes you have to fight like a rabid stray cat that just got cornered by a 2-year-old toddler. That's just the way it is. And it's okay to break those rules. Now, with the brain being hardwired for self-preservation, it is processing, your subconscious is processing billions of things each minute. And if it told you everything that it was picking up on, you would go insane. And so it knows better. So you have to communicate with your subconscious and say, hey, I want to know these things. So as you work through these exercises and critical thinking, and you talk to your family and friends, not only are they going to see how you're going to know how you're going to react, but it also helps them start thinking and working through plans and working through different scenarios. We have another game that we play that when we watch shows, we try to pick out the bad guy before the music starts. Not only do you pick out the bad guy, but you need to articulate why that guy was the bad guy. This helps you as far as being able to communicate with others like law enforcement if there is an issue that you have to defend yourself, and also be able to communicate with law enforcement as far as if they need to go check out this person or animal, we'll be able to take care of them. When you're dealing with other deprogramming that we're dealing with, is it's okay to bite and strike. All too often, we're told not to speak up. Don't be rude. If the wonderful thing about dogs and children is they haven't been programmed yet, and they don't have a problem speaking up. One of those examples is if they don't want to hug Uncle Jake, there's a reason why. They don't feel comfortable and they don't, you need to listen to that. If your body, when it's starting to feel stressors, there are 23 chemicals that are dumped into your system when it starts sensing problems or starts sensing a possible threat. And one of those is adrenaline, which gives you strength and gives you the ability to either fight or flight. Another one is cortisol, which is a painkiller, so that helps deaden the pain so you can keep fighting and get away. And a lot of those will increase the heart rate, increase your blood pressure so that you can function. It starts pulling, that's why the face goes pale sometimes. It's because it's pulling the blood into the vitals so that you can be able to function. You can be able to fight your way out of the situation or run away. Now, another one of those side effects is butterflies in the stomach. So, how many of you have ever had a situation where the hair on the back of your neck stands up? How about goosebumps? How about butterflies in the stomach, that you feel a little queasy or a little? Those are signs that when you start feeling that, you need to learn your body. Different people exhibit different ways, as far as some are more predominant than others. Feel a little flushed, you feel like your heart rate's raising. You need to take a deep breath and then start paying attention to what's going on around you. And as you take that deep breath, it accomplishes multiple things. Not only does it help get oxygen into your body, which you forget to breathe when you're fighting off, and you need oxygen. You need that fuel to help. But it also helps ground you and center you. Because as you relax and you focus, not only does it help you with your brain and your critical thinking, but it calms you down to where you can respond. Because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. There's a reason why in the military they say that, because if you can slow down your movements, you're more precise and you're going to be able to move a lot smoother and a lot faster. And as you train and practice, you're also going to be training your body to be able to respond to those neural pathways, to be able to, without even thinking. And if you've ever noticed when you're grooming animals, that there are certain procedures or certain things that you do that you don't even think about now, because you just kind of repetitively go through it, and your nerves actually work pathways, and your brain actually works pathways to shortcut so that it's quicker and easier to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, when you're dealing with a threat, and you're actually getting attacked, then there are certain targets and strikes that are effective that you can be able to move into. Now, do you have a question?
This was like way before I was a groomer.
What was that?
This was way before I was a groomer. I had a Labrador, and some German Shepherd came out with my dog's throat, and the kids came out running after the German Shepherd because it's a family dog, and they were screaming, and then like I don't know what it was, but my body just like stopped, and it was just everything was still, and I just walked up and I pulled the dog away, handed it to the child, and let my dog run away because he had a good recall. And then I just don't know like what that was. Was that like calming down, or was that what you're trying to explain?
Different people react differently. There are some that inherently can focus in and operate. There are a lot of people that don't. That's why you have to hedge the bets in your favor. Some of those, like that critical thinking and working through the ideas, and because ultimately, if you don't acknowledge that evil exists and that it can hurt you, then it's going to get you.
Yeah.
Because no awareness, no chance. There's no way that you can, even if you're the most skilled marksman in firearms, or the most the highest level in any martial arts, if you don't, your hands could be lethal weapons, and if you don't acknowledge and recognize the threat and it gets you before, it's useless. So with your case, you're blessed with that response.
I've just been always, I don't know, anytime something like really, like dangerous something happens, then like my body just calms down. I have anxiety, which is weird.
It's like
So,
a
I
normal
don't know.
state.
I'm the same way. I get anxiety as well, and I get wound up thinking about it later on.
Yeah.
But when the rubber hits the road, I function, and a lot of it's training. A lot of it, I know what to do. You're familiar with animals, so you're familiar with what to do. Now, when you're dealing with, your brain is like a file folder. It's a computer that has a bunch of folders in it. If you don't have those file folders in there, then you're SOL. Your brain will not compute.
In fact, I actually heard a theory on that, because I think it's like pretty common with all the dog groomers, at least a lot of ones I know do deal with like a form of anxiety of some sort. And I heard a theory once that people with anxiety are like the best people to have around in a crisis, is because we live our life in anxiety, and then when there's a crisis, there's finally a reason for the anxiety, so our brain's like, oh, here we go. It's like, this is what I'm trained for. And so if they actually say that like, having anxiety is great to have for when there is a crisis, is they do tend to respond better than those people that are not familiar with that constant anxiety. You know?
Now, that's not healthy to have that constant. Because what it is it wears you down. And if you're not healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually, you're more susceptible to attacks and to predators.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's the same way with animals. If they're not healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually, which dogs are, and cats and animals are typically pretty spiritual. So they've got that down. But the healthy physical and mental, if they're not, then they're more likely to either be subject to being under high stress and reacting wrong, or becoming prey. So when you're dealing with that, I'm co-authoring a book with a combat vet that overcomes PTSD. The book is on the color codes, the color awareness, and it's living in condition yellow. And it's basically going over we help people that get out of condition white into yellow, which is awareness of surroundings instead of being clueless. But we also are working on different techniques to be able to move from orange and red down to yellow to run healthily, because you can't constantly be scanning. If you're going into a room and you're constantly scanning and you're constantly looking for a threat, you're going to wear out, and you're either going to burn out, or you're going to be so tired by the time the threat actually happens that you're going to miss it. And those color codes, if you're not familiar with the color codes, there's white, yellow, orange, red, and black. They're the 5 color codes of Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. And he developed this in the military to help combatants understand the mindset. Now, yellow or white is completely clueless. Yellow is aware of your surroundings. You understand that evil exists and that you can be involved in violence. Orange is there's a possible threat. There's something going on. Somebody's breaking rules. There's indicators telling you that things are not right. Red is you are being attacked. You are in the process of fighting for your life. Black is comatose, completely out of the game. Now, I like to tie it into a transmission of a car. Now, if those of you that don't understand, that have always dealt with automatics, I feel sorry for you. But manuals, you have to shift and you have to force those gears and run those gears. Now, in the idea of a car, white is in reverse. You can move and you can operate in reverse. But to get into an attack, into red, what happens if you shift from reverse to third gear? Are you driving? No, you're in black. Oh. So you're either damaging your transmission or you're not getting into that gear. You're dying. The engine's, you're no luck. Now, when you're dealing with yellow, well, in the other spectrum, you can't run in first gear at second and third gear speeds. It burns up your engine, it burns up your transmission, and you can't function for long. So the idea is first gear is yellow, second gear is orange, third gear is red, and then black is neutral, or your transmission's dead. So you can run into first gear and start seeing threats and move into shift into second and third gear really quite easily, right? So the key is to maintain your transmission, maintain and be able to run in that yellow, and not be in the extremes of both. Because hypervigilance turns into paranoia. And the difference between hypervigilance and paranoia is those threats that don't exist, and hypervigilance is watching for those threats that are existing, those indicators that are starting to pop up, and you're in orange. When you're in orange, you want to be hypervigilant. You want to be pay attention even more to those details. Now you want to move, once you hit about 3, you don't want to go past 3 indicators. You want to have that goal to act as soon as you doing something once you hit that 3 indicators. The problem is as humans, we want to rationalize things. We want to push it away. And so that's when you get from identifying those threats and your gut telling you to saying, oh, man, I felt that. I should have known better. Is that indecisive, that 3 indicators. Now, if it's a complete in-your-face threat, you don't need to wait for 3. You can operate off 1, but you don't ever want to get past 3 indicators. And in those subtle indicators, it can save your life. It can change your world and make it from the difference of backing away from that German Shepherd that's starting to focus on you as prey, to losing your life or losing an eye. I mean, there's so many different cases that can happen. Any questions, comments, concerns, analogies, anything that?
Okay, so you said that it's harder to identify in the alpha apex predator for humans. What are the good identifiers for those types of men?
No, it's hard to identify the stressors.
Yes,
So when
yeah.
they're under stress, as far as fidgeting and
Mhm.
things like that, they're harder to identify. Now, when you're dealing with alpha apex predators, it's the posture that you're going to be watching, the body
Okay.
language.
Okay.
So as a human predator, you want to watch the hand. So if he's walking along with his hand, which animals don't care, they're not going to hide their claws. They're not going to hide their weapons. Humans, they're smart enough that they know to hide. So if you're walking up and you get in the area and somebody's got their hand in their pocket or under something or behind them, you want to watch that. If they're walking with an irregular gait, a lot of the time when you're dealing with a concealed weapon, which just because they have a concealed weapon doesn't mean that they're a bad guy,
Yeah.
but you'll want to be able to acknowledge and recognize those that are, because they could be a help or a hindrance if something does happen. So dealing with those, you've got indicators of a concealed weapon, whether they're tapping a certain part of their body, even just glancing at it. That's a subconscious of making sure, because guns and knives, they're unbalanced. So when they're stuck in the waistband or in under the arm or in a pocket, they'll shift on them, and so they're constantly trying to right that. Parts of that is the clothing will hang a little off. You get bulges. If somebody's wearing a shirt or a jacket and it's off, that means that there's something heavy in that pocket. Clips that don't go to anything. If there's a clip on the belt, whether it's a solid extra belt loop plastic clip that doesn't go to anything, or just because the shirt's tucked in doesn't mean that you don't have a gun in your waistband. It's all perception. It's all understanding to watch. Also in how they carry themselves. So if I'm standing with my feet directly close together, or I'm leaning up against something, I'm going to have a harder time to move quickly. So if I'm preparing to attack, my feet are going to be a little farther apart. Typically one foot is going to be a little closer, and my hands are going to be above my waist or in the pocket. So I'm hiding a weapon that I'm going to be able to use. Distance is your friend. All the time, distance is your friend. And unfortunately for society, we skip that sometimes, getting into elevators in large groups. But sometimes you have to, and nobody does. Nobody likes it. There are other indicators of a smile. Extreme smiles are an indicator of threat. Did you realize that people don't naturally smile for happiness? They don't show their teeth when they're happy. It's a programmed thing. Now, eyes, when you're happy, your eyes are typically, the eyes are pulled up a little bit more, but when you're hyper-focused, when you can learn facial expressions as far as anger and disdain, those are the two main expressions that you really want to watch for. And
What I got
I was just looking at the lunch meat, and he's like, this guy comes up, he's like really old, like 80. And he's like, do you know what time it is? And I was like, no. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I left my phone at home. Like, you know, and then he just pulled out a knife and I thought he punched me. I didn't even know what he had done, because I kind of like felt like a punch, like a sting. And I'm like, why did you do that? And he's like, I stabbed you. And like, he got this like look on him. I just dropped everything and like went backwards, found the guy in the meat department and was like, please help me. Like, that man, something's not right. And they asked him, he kept saying, yeah, I stabbed her. And then they were like, are you sure he didn't stab you? I didn't even know I had been stabbed. And I went like this in my stomach, and there was blood, and I was just like, what?
And know why you didn't feel that?
Why?
Because those chemicals that were dumping into your system.
Okay.
Because your subconscious was picking up those rules that he was
Yeah.
breaking as he closed that distance.
Yeah.
And a lot of times predators, when they're wanting to, they'll have an excuse of, you know, some change.
Right.
You have time.
Yeah.
And all of a
That's kinda, he was
sudden,
like really close to me too.
distance,
Yeah.
distance is your friend.
Right.
So as you're paying attention, and that's breaking social rules.
Right.
And when you're dealing with two people, you're not gonna have a total stranger, and they call it proxemics.
Right.
So it's how the distance, and you can tell also by when people are entering into a space,
Yeah.
whether somebody's a possible threat as well, because they'll have that natural reaction. Their body, since their brain's hardwired for self-preservation,
Yeah.
their subconscious is filing, even though they may not realize it, they're doing actions like crossing,
Right.
whether it's putting hands up like this, a cup, or crossing the legs,
Yeah.
or turning slightly. Those are all behaviors that, and you can tell an uncomfortable face. So when you've got two people walking into an entrance, and the one person is obviously trying to get, even if it's an inch, they're trying to get that distance, I'd be watching the person that they're trying to move away from.
Right.
Because they are indicating those stressors of that person.
Yeah.
And whether they're know it or not. But what happens is your brain is already recognized that, and you may not have acknowledged it or recognized it, but your heart rate was up,
Yeah.
your blood pressure was up before he ever even stabbed you.
Right.
And so
it
that
was
dump, that cortisol
awkwardness.
dump,
Yeah.
so you don't feel it until
Right.
later, and you're like, oh crap.
I know.
When the drugs are wearing off.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really weird. And then like now every time I'm shopping, I get kind of like looking around all the time, like, or if someone walks too close,
So
I just
you-
feel instant like, oh.
You want to watch hands and eyes. Eyes are the window to the soul. Now, also, when you're dealing with eyes, they call targeting glances. They'll watch and look for targets that they're going to go to. So when he goes to you, if he's going to go for your abdomen, he's going to glance down.
Right.
If he's going to go for your purse, he's going to glance down to your purse. He's going to look at your hands. He's going to look at your throat. It's the same with animals. If they're starting to look at your,
Right.
even if they're looking away and looking at your throat, and don't put dogs in human mentality.
Right.
We've seen videos over and over again of a dog that's in stress. It's looking up, and people go, oh, that dog's looking in adoration. No, that dog's not looking in adoration. That dog is scared shitless.
Yeah.
And it's looking up, targeting neck and throat, eyes, what I'm gonna go for. There's
What do I
a
have to
reason
do
why
to
when dogs
survive?
attack,
Yeah.
that a lot of the time it punctures the eyes and the throat, because those are targets that are taught from puppyhood when they're playing, that are a very effective target.
How to
Because,
protect themselves.
yeah,
if
those
they're in danger.
stop the threat. Because you can't see, you can't attack very easily, you can't breathe, you can't attack easily. Oxygen is a major factor of life and
Yeah.
moving. Any other questions, or?
I was just gonna comment, I saw a video on TikTok where a girl stung. Like there was the dog was obviously comfortable and had like a wipe his eyes, like looking away, and she stuck her hand in there and he bit down on her
Is
hand.
that the golden retriever?
I've seen so many videos of little babies playing with the dog and the cat, and oh, that wonderful, no, and that cat's flipping its tail, the dog's
Right,
going
waiting.
wide eyes and going, just
Those
moving
make me
back a little
so
bit.
mad. Those so
Or the dog moves its paw on top of the child.
Yeah.
That's a possessive behavior, that's not a good sign. And you can spend years studying body language, but ultimately a shortcut for that is trust your gut, learn how your body responds to stress and pay attention to that. And then also, you need to remember that predators are looking for the weaker and more easy targets. So how many of you ever heard of the fable that if you're walking in a dark alley and you want to look like you're safe, pick up your phone, put it to your ear, and act like you're talking to somebody? Do not do that.
Okay.
Because you're distracted. The predator's going to go, hey, they're talking on the phone. They don't. Predator doesn't care if you're on the phone with the cops. How close are the cops if they're on the phone?
Right.
How long does it take for them to take what they want, do what they want before the cops get there? They're going to be done and gone before the cops ever even get there.
I've also heard that, like, if you feel like someone's following you, you're supposed to grab whoever's, like, the person in front of you that's just walking and act like you know them. Act like you're with them.
Pack up.
Pack up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. I just didn't know if that was, like if you're just two people walking on the street and you feel like someone's following you, you can just go up and talk to them and start acting like you're together. That's a good thing to do.
Communication is an awesome thing as well. So if you've got somebody, now if I'm walking, and I like to think myself as pretty capable of defending myself. If I'm walking on the green belt, I mean, I have no shortage of at least 5 different tools that I can kill you with on me.
That's comforting to know.
I do. I've got everything from, even a tactical pen, I can kill you with it. Because I've trained, I've practiced with it, and I know. And even when I'm walking on the green belt and I walk past somebody, I'm going to glance over my shoulder and make sure that they're obeying the rules. If they're changing and they're breaking the social rules, if they stop, if they're glancing back at me, and as a female, perception is a major thing. You realize that the numbers of people having a chance to be a victim, or the percentage of people being a victim of violent crime, men are actually more likely than women to be a violent victim in their life. It's in 93% of all men will be a victim of violent crime in their lifetime, and it's 87% for women, which those numbers are way too high. But it also helps you understand that the more solid the guy is, the less likely he's going to talk about that sexual abuse that happened. And communication is your tool. Communication, everything from a scavenger predator that's coming in, stop, no, back off. That communication lets them know, and it also lets everybody know that around you, that gal, that's what saved her from getting raped, was her being vocal. Because he's afraid of other people coming in, and he was justifiably worried about it because he got nailed for it. It's the same way with, you see somebody's walking behind you. You okay? Is there an issue? How are you doing? That simple act, if they're following you, especially if you can't get away rapidly, that simple act of, I see you, I recognize you. They may not be following you, and they may go, sorry. Or they may be following you and go, oh, sorry. But when you acknowledge that, when you communicate, it's a major tool. And it helps with so many different aspects. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to communicate. When you're dealing with an animal that is uncertain and that is disassociated even, that you don't want to be forceful, but that calm speaking, even with guys that are out hunting with mountain lions, hey kitty, or hey bear,
Yeah.
I'm not a threat, you're okay. When you start calming down or start speaking in a calm voice, that is a major tool when you're dealing with the sick or disassociated predator. Because if you're calming them down, but you always want to be prepared for a strike. You always want to be prepared, because you call them out, they may rush you. And then the rabid stray cat must come out of you. And you go for the eyes and throat, and you take care of business until you can get away. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of playing into that, like acknowledging them. One thing that I was always taught was that like traffickers and stuff, or people looking for victims, they are less likely to attack you if when they interact with you, you make eye contact and you interact back. People who kind of close in on themselves or they avoid eye contact are more likely to be targeted because they look weak. They look easy to overpower. They look like they're not going to fight back like that woman did.
Ted Bundy said, and we all know who Ted Bundy is, he said, I could tell a victim by the tilt of her head. They did a study with Rikers Island that they videoed a corner on New York for several days, and they showed them to the most vile criminals that they could, and they asked them how do you tell and pick a victim? Whether the bottom 3, 1 through 3, the soft victim, or the top one, 7 through 10, which are hard victims, they're hard targets. And they said it was weakness, irregular gait, walking with their head down. And that's one of the reasons why when you're acting like you're talking on the phone, if you're feeling like you're unsure, you put that phone away. Because you need your hands free and you need to be aware, you need to get up. Just the simple act of getting your head up, your shoulders back, increasing your size and your posture makes you look healthier, stronger, and less attractive to an attacker.
It's like a fake it till you make it.
So what if eye
Doesn't matter if
contact
you're
makes you uncomfortable? Because we're making eye contact and it makes me uncomfortable.
Eye contact makes
Figure
me
out
angry.
why and deal with
I
it.
just kept doing
It's anxiety.
Because there are certain aspects, that you really want to deal with, and you don't have to be able to make eye contact and lock and stare somebody down. You don't have to.
It's fine with my husband, but nobody else.
As long as you're looking more healthy, you're up, and you're aware, and you're looking around, you don't have to lock eyes with everything around you. As long as you're looking and you're aware of your surroundings, your odds increase dramatically as far as not being a victim.
I have a comment about the eye contact. I hate making eye contact. It makes me really, really anxious. Like what he said is do some training. Try and glance at their eyes for only 3 seconds and then smile and look at something else. Their shirt, their pen. Mine are shoes.
Yeah, I'm like looking all over your body.
Yeah,
not your
I
eyes
like
now.
shoes. I look at their shoes. I try to, first the 3 seconds is to see what color their eyes are. But typically I don't like being that close to people.
And distance are your friend.
So distance. But that's what the 3 seconds, to see if I can, in that 3 seconds, be like, okay, her eyes are blue. And then I'm like, okay, what kind of earrings is she wearing? So I'm still like, shoulders back, head up straight, but eye contact is like, just do